She has no wolf. That is what the healers told her mother the day she was born. No spark of beast behind her eyes, no second heartbeat thrumming beneath her skin. In a world where your wolf determines your worth, Kethra is worth nothing. So when she arrives at the capital gates after 17 days of walking, her boots worn through, and her body half-starved, the guards barely glance at her. No wolf means no rank. No rank means no name worth recording. She is invisible. She has always been invisible, but she needs answers. And the only person who might have them is the Alpha King himself. She slips through the crowd gathered at the great stone square, shoulders hunched, head down. Thousands have come to witness the king's return from the Eastern campaign. Banners snap in the cold wind. Children sit on their father's shoulders. Wolves pace alongside their bonded humans, eyes bright with anticipation. Kethra has no wolf pacing beside her. She has only hunger, and a question that has haunted her for 23 years. The drums begin. The crowd falls silent. And then he appears. Alpha King Valdrich of House Thornwell rides through the gates on a warhorse black as midnight. His armor is battle-scarred, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, his face carved from stone and shadow. But it is not the king that makes the crowd stop breathing. It is the beast beside him. Massive, monstrous, a wolf the size of a draft horse, fur so black it seems to drink the light. It moves like death given form, and the crowd presses back in terror. But the beast stops. Its great head swings toward the crowd, toward Kethra, and it does something it has never done in the recorded history of the kingdom. It bows. The silence is absolute. Every eye turns to the ragged, wolfless woman standing frozen in the square. And the Alpha King's gaze follows his beasts. Kethra had arrived in the square just before dawn. She remembered being hungry. She remembered the cold biting through her thin cloak somewhere around the 12th day of walking. But those sensations had faded into something dull and distant, replaced by a single thought that pulsed with every step. Keep moving. Find answers. Don't stop. She had almost stopped twice. Once, when a farmer's cart had passed her on the muddy road without slowing, the driver's eyes sliding over her like she wasn't there. Once, when she had collapsed against a milestone marker and considered simply closing her eyes forever. But her mother's voice had found her in that darkness. You are more than what they see, my love. You are more than what you lack. Kethra had risen. She had kept walking. And now she was here, standing in the great square of Ashenmoor, the capital city of the Northern Reach, surrounded by wolves and warriors and everything she would never be. The beast was still staring at her. Her mind refused to process what she had just witnessed. The creature, extraordinarily large, utterly terrifying, had lowered its head to the ground before her, like a subject before a queen, like a wolf acknowledging its master. But she had no wolf. She had never had a wolf. Why would it? You. The voice cut through her spiral. Deep, rough, commanding in a way that made something beneath her ribs tighten. The crowd parted instantly, and she looked up into eyes the color of storm clouds, gray-green and fierce and focused entirely on her. Alpha King Valdrich dismounted in a single fluid movement. He was taller than she had expected, broader. The scars crossing his face told stories of battles survived, enemies defeated. Everything about him radiated power. Everything about him should have terrified her. Instead, Kethra felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seen. You made my beast bow, the king said. It wasn't a question. His voice carried an edge of disbelief, tightly controlled. How? Kethra's throat worked. I don't know. I didn't do anything. His eyes narrowed. You're lying. I'm not. Her voice cracked. I swear on my mother's grave, I don't understand what just happened. Something flickered across his face. He was studying her now, really studying her. The hollow cheeks, the road-worn clothes, the absolute absence of a wolf's presence at her side. She watched realization dawn. "You have no wolf," he said slowly. "No. No pack markings, no house insignia, nothing." Kethra lifted her chin, though it cost her every scrap of dignity she had left. "Nothing," the crowd murmured. She could feel their stares like brands on her skin, hot and sharp. A wolfless woman had made the king's legendary beast submit. It was unthinkable. It was heresy. It was sorcery, someone hissed from the crowd. "She's cursed the beast! Kill her! Burn her before she corrupts the king!" The shouts rose like a wave, crashing toward her. Kethra's pulse jumped. She took a step back, then another, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd pressed in on all sides, faces twisted with fear and fury. Silence. One word from the king. That was all it took. The crowd fell mute. Valdrich hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, but the command in that single syllable was absolute. He turned back to Kethra, and this time his expression held something she couldn't name. "What is your name?" he asked. "Kethra." "Kethra what?" She hesitated. "Just Kethra. I have no house, no family name that I know of." "Where do you come from?" "A village called Grey Mist, in the southern marshes. It's small." "You wouldn't—" "I know it." A muscle worked in his cheek. "Why are you here?" "Because I'm searching for the woman who abandoned me as an infant. Because the dream started 6 months ago and I haven't slept a full night since. Because something inside me feels like it's waking up, and I don't know what it is." But she couldn't say any of that. Not here. Not with 1,000 eyes boring into her. "I'm looking for answers," she said simply, "about who I am." The great black wolf had risen from its bough and padded forward. The crowd gasped, pressing back in fresh terror, but the beast ignored them entirely. It stopped beside Kethra and lowered its head, pressing its massive muzzle against her palm. Heat flooded through her. Not pain. Something else. Something that felt like recognition. Valdrich watched the interaction with an expression caught between wonder and unease. "My beast has never bowed to anyone," he said quietly. "Not my father. Not the elders. Not even me, when I first took the throne." He paused, his gaze unbearably heavy. "Yet it bows to a wolfless stranger with no name in any record we keep." Kethra's hand trembled against the beast's fur. "I don't understand it either." "Then we will find out together." The king turned to his guards. "Prepare quarters in the East Tower. She will be under my protection until we determine what she is." The commander of the guard stepped forward, face pale. "Your Majesty, with respect. She could be an assassin, a witch, she is under my protection." Valdrich's voice dropped to something cold and final. "Anyone who harms her answers to me." Kethra stared at him, stunned. 12 days ago she had been no one, invisible, worthless. Now the most powerful man in the kingdom was declaring her protected. And as the guards moved to escort her toward the towering fortress of black stone, Kethra felt the beast's amber gaze follow her, steady, certain, knowing. Like it had been waiting for her all along. The beast had never disobeyed him before. Valdrich stood at the window of his war chamber, watching the strange woman being led across the courtyard below. She walked with her shoulders straight despite her obvious exhaustion, her chin lifted despite the hostile stares from every direction. Something stirred deep in his core. He crushed it immediately. "Run her name again," he said without turning. Senna, his chief advisor and keeper of records, looked up from the stack of ledgers she'd been rifling through for the past hour. "Your Majesty, I've checked every register we have. Birth records, pack registrations, migration logs, visitor scrolls, even the census of the unaffiliated." She paused, her weathered face troubled. She doesn't exist. Everyone exists somewhere. Not her. Senna set down her quill. Kethra. No surname, no house, no pack. There is no record of anyone matching her description entering the kingdom. No record of her being born in Grey Mist or anywhere else in the southern marshes. No record of her family, her lineage, anything. She hesitated. It's as if she appeared from nowhere. Valdrich's teeth clenched, or someone erased her. The implication hung heavy in the air. Senna rose slowly. She was old enough to have served his father and his grandfather before him, and she was not easily shaken. But her eyes held something he rarely saw there, genuine uncertainty. "What happened in the square?" she said carefully. "Your beast." Bowed to her. Valdrich turned from the window. "I'm aware. It has never bowed. To anyone. Not in 200 years of recorded history." "I'm aware of that as well." "Then you understand why the council is already meeting." Senna's voice dropped. "Lord Ashwin has been in the chamber for an hour. He's calling for her execution before nightfall." Valdrich's hands clenched behind his back. Lord Ashwin, the snake who had opposed every decision Valdrich had made since taking the throne. Who had whispered in his father's ear about war and expansion and the necessity of brutality? Who had survived 4 kings and somehow managed to position himself at the center of power under each one? "On what grounds?" Valdrich asked, though he already knew the answer. "Sorcery. Corruption of the royal beast. Potential assassination plot." Senna's mouth twisted. "Take your pick. He has 3 separate charges prepared. And my beast's behavior? He claims she enchanted it. A spell. Dark magic from beyond the border." Valdrich exhaled slowly. He had fought battles that left him less tired than this. The truth was, he didn't understand what had happened any more than Ashwin did. His beast, Morak, the Black Terror, the shadow wolf that had bonded to his bloodline 7 generations ago, answered to no one. It tolerated Valdrich because the bond required it. It obeyed because instinct demanded it. But it had never shown submission, never lowered its head in deference, until a half-starved woman with no wolf and no name walked into his city. "I want to see her," Valdrich said. Senna's eyebrows rose. "Personally." "Did I stutter?" "Your Majesty, the council will not—" "The council serves at my pleasure." He moved toward the door. "And I have questions that require answers. Tell Ashwin he can wait." He found her in the East Tower room he'd assigned. It was comfortable but simple. A bed, a fire, a window overlooking the inner gardens. Not a prison, but certainly not a welcome either. The guards at her door straightened as he approached. He dismissed them with a gesture and stepped inside. She was standing at the window, still wearing the same travel-worn clothes, her dark hair tangled around her shoulders. She turned when he entered, and those eyes, storm-colored, just a shade darker than his own, met his without flinching. Most people couldn't hold his gaze for more than a few seconds. She held it without wavering. "You haven't eaten," he observed, noting the untouched tray on the small table. "I wasn't sure if it was poisoned. A ghost of something? Surprise? Respect?" Moved through him. "Sensible. It isn't. You'll forgive me if I don't take the word of the man who could execute me on a whim. I have no intention of executing you. Your council does." So she'd heard. He shouldn't have been surprised. Sound carried in old stone fortresses, and servants gossiped. "My council advises," Valdrich said. "I decide." She studied him with an intensity that made something prickle along the back of his neck. "Why are you protecting me? You don't know who I am. I could be everything they're saying. A sorceress. An assassin. A threat." "Are you? No? Then we have no problem." "That's not an answer." She was right. It wasn't. But Valdrich didn't have a better one. Not one that made sense, even to himself. The truth was, the moment his beast had bowed, something had shifted inside him. A certainty he couldn't explain or ignore. The beast knew something he didn't, felt something he couldn't. And until he understood what that was, he would not let anyone touch her. "My beast has never acknowledged anyone but my bloodline," he said quietly. "It answers to the Thornwell wolves because of an ancient bond, blood magic, sealed generations ago." Kethra's expression flickered. "I don't have any Thornwell blood." "No, you don't have any blood on record at all." He paused. "Which means either you're a ghost or someone has gone to considerable trouble to make sure you don't exist." She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, "I was left as an infant at the edge of gray mist. A woman named Matilda raised me. She told me my mother appeared in the night, placed me in her arms, and begged her to keep me hidden. Then she vanished." Valdrich felt something cold settle at his center. "Hidden from whom?" "I don't know." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "But 6 months ago, I started having dreams. The same dream, every night. A black wolf, running through snow, a fortress made of dark stone, and a voice telling me to come north." The fire crackled. Neither of them spoke. "What did the voice say?" Valdrich asked finally. Kethra met his eyes. "It said, 'He has been waiting for you.'" 3 days in the fortress, and Kethra still felt like she was dreaming. The bed was softer than anything she had ever slept on. The food appeared 3 times daily, rich and warm and plentiful. A servant had brought her new clothes, simple but well made, the fabric finer than anything she'd owned in her life. It should have felt like a gift. Instead, it felt like a trap with silk lining. She was allowed to move freely through the East Tower, but guards followed her everywhere. Polite, silent, watchful. When she walked the corridors, servants pressed themselves against walls and averted their eyes. When she entered the library seeking something to occupy her restless mind, the scholars gathered their books and fled as if she carried plague. Wolfless, nameless, unnatural. The whispers followed her like shadows. But it was the beast that unsettled her most. It appeared without warning, sometimes outside her window, sometimes at the far end of a hallway, always watching with those ancient sun-bright eyes. It never approached. It simply observed, patient and immovable, like it was waiting for something she hadn't done yet. On the 3rd morning, she woke to find it lying across her doorway. "You're not subtle," she told it, stepping carefully over its massive form. Morak's ears flicked. If wolves could look amused, this one did. She was heading toward the gardens, the one place where the walls didn't press so close, when she heard the crying. High and thin and muffled, the sound of a child trying desperately not to be heard. Kethra stopped. The guards behind her stopped as well, their faces carefully blank. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what, miss?" She ignored them and followed the sound. Down a narrow corridor, through an archway covered in climbing ivy, into a small courtyard she hadn't seen before, where an ancient oak spread bare branches toward the gray winter sky. A boy crouched at the base of the tree, small, maybe 7 or 8 years old, his knees pulled to his chest, his face buried in his arms. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "Hello?" Kethra approached slowly. "Are you hurt?" The boy's head jerked up. His face was pale, streaked with tears, and his eyes, one brown, one startlingly blue, went wide with terror when he saw her. "Please don't. I'm sorry. I'll go back, I promise. Just please don't." "Hey! Hey!" Kethra crouched to his level, keeping her voice soft. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just heard you crying." The boy stared at her, frozen, like a rabbit before a hawk. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Pif, Prim." His voice was barely a whisper. "My name is Prim." "That's a nice name. I'm Kethra." She smiled, hoping it looked more reassuring than it felt. "Why are you crying, Prim?" His lower lip trembled. "I ran away from lessons. Master Corbin says I'm useless because I can't shift yet, and none of the other children want to partner with me because I'm a late bloomer, and they say my wolf will probably be pathetic and—" The words tumbled out in a rush, ending in a hiccup. Kethra's chest ached. She knew that pain. She had lived inside it for 23 years. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked softly. Prim blinked, tears still wet on his cheeks. "What kind of secret?" "I don't have a wolf at all, never had one. The healer said I was born without." The boy's mismatched eyes went huge. "You don't have a wolf?" "Nope, not even a whisper of one." "But—" his brow furrowed. "But you're still alive. You're still here." "I am." Kethra reached out and gently brushed a tear from his cheek. "Having a wolf doesn't make you valuable, Prim. Being kind does. Being brave does. Everything else is just extra." Something happened in the boy's face. A loosening. A release. Like a knot finally coming undone. "Papa used to say that," he whispered. "Before he—" He trailed off, and Kethra didn't push. She simply sat beside him against the ancient oak and let the silence hold them both. That was how the king found them. Kethra heard the footsteps first. Heavy, deliberate, unmistakably Valdrich's. She looked up to see him standing at the courtyard entrance, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. "Your Majesty." The guards snapped to attention. Valdrich ignored them. His eyes moved from Kethra to Prim, to their proximity against the tree, and something complicated moved through his expression. "Prim," he said, "Master Corbin is looking for you." The boy scrambled to his feet, but he didn't immediately run. Instead, he looked back at Kethra with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," he said quietly, for saying that. Then he was gone, darting past the king and disappearing into the corridor. Valdrich watched him go. When he turned back to Kethra, his face had shifted, the stone mask cracking just slightly. "Prim is my nephew," he said. "My sister's son. His father was killed in the Eastern Campaign. The fighting has been ongoing for months, but the message about his death reached us only 8 weeks ago." Kethra's chest clenched. "I didn't know." "You wouldn't." He paused. "He hasn't spoken to anyone about his father since it happened. The healers are concerned. My sister is devastated." His eyes found hers. "What did you say to him?" "Nothing special. I just told him the truth, that having a wolf doesn't determine your worth." Something flickered in Valdrich's expression. "You believe that?" "I've had to. Otherwise I would have stopped living a long time ago." The words hung between them, raw and honest and heavier than she'd intended. Valdrich was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge. "There's something I need you to see," he said, "in the archives. Something that might explain why my beast recognizes you." Kethra rose slowly. "What kind of something?" "A portrait." His teeth clenched briefly. "Painted over 200 years ago, of a woman who looks exactly like you." The world tilted. "What?" she breathed. Valdrich extended his hand. "Come with me." And despite every instinct screaming that she was walking into something she couldn't undo, Kethra took it. The archives were buried deep beneath the fortress, carved into the living rock of the mountain itself. Valdrich had been down here perhaps a dozen times in his life, once as a child, clutching his father's hand, once as a young man, searching for military records during his first campaign, and once after his father's death, looking for something he still couldn't name. He had never brought anyone else. The torchlight threw long shadows across the ancient walls as they descended. Kethra walked beside him in silence, her hand still warm where it rested in his. He should release it. There was no reason to keep holding on. He didn't let go. These archives contain every record of House Thornwell since its founding, he said, more to break the silence than to inform. Births, deaths, marriages, treaties, everything deemed important enough to preserve. And portraits? Kethra's voice echoed slightly in the narrow stairwell. Some. The older ones are kept separately. They're fragile. What he didn't say was that the portrait he was taking her to see had been locked away for 2 centuries, sealed by his ancestor with orders that it never be viewed again. He had broken those orders 3 hours ago. The chamber at the bottom of the stairs was circular, lined with shelves that stretched toward a ceiling lost in darkness. Scrolls and bound volumes filled every available space, their leather spines cracked with age. The air smelled of dust and time and something faintly metallic. Valdrich led her to the far wall, where a heavy cloth covered a frame nearly as tall as she was. "Before I show you this," he said, turning to face her, "I need you to understand something." Kethra met his eyes. Even here, in the dim underground chamber, she didn't look away, didn't cower, didn't defer. It was maddening. It was magnificent. "What I'm about to show you doesn't make sense," he continued. "I've had Senna research everything she can find, and there's no explanation that fits within reason. I stopped expecting reason 3 days ago," Kethra said quietly. "When your beast bowed to me." "Fair point." Valdrich reached for the cloth, hesitated, then pulled it away. The portrait beneath had been painted with extraordinary skill. The colors had faded with time, but the image remained clear. A woman standing in a garden of white roses, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her face turned slightly toward the viewer with the hint of a smile. Kethra made a sound, small, involuntary, like she'd been struck. Valdrich understood. He had made a similar sound when he'd first seen it. The woman in the portrait was Kethra. Not similar, not resembling, identical. The same sea-glass eyes, the same curve of cheekbone, the same slight asymmetry in her smile, even the way she held herself, shoulders straight, chin lifted, defiant and graceful at once. "Her name was Seraphine," Valdrich said. "She lived 217 years ago." Kethra's hand rose toward the portrait, trembling. "That's not possible." "I agree. And yet, who was she?" Valdrich took a breath. This was where it became complicated, where it became dangerous. She was the Luna of Alpha King Alderaan Thornwell, my ancestor. He paused. And according to the few records that weren't destroyed, she was the original bondkeeper of Morak. Kethra's eyes snapped to his. Bondkeeper? The beasts of House Thornwell are not ordinary wolves. They're ancient spirits, bound to our bloodline through a ritual performed at the founding of the kingdom. Each generation, the bond passes to the new Alpha King. Valdrich's voice grew heavier. But the bond wasn't always held by the king. In the beginning, it was held by his mate, his Luna, the bond keeper. "Seraphine," Kethra whispered. "Yes. The records say she could command Morak with a thought, that the beast adored her, protected her, would destroy armies for her." Valdrich looked at the portrait. "They also say she vanished one night without warning. No body was ever found. No explanation was ever given. And 2 weeks after her disappearance, King Alderaan ordered every mention of her name erased from the kingdom's history." The torchlight flickered. Shadows danced across Seraphine's painted face. "Why?" Kethra asked. "Why would he erase his own Luna?" "No one knows. The records of that period were purged so thoroughly that even Senna couldn't find more than fragments." Valdrich turned to face her fully. "But here's what I do know. Morak has never bowed to anyone since Seraphine disappeared. Not to Alderaan, not to any king who came after. The beast tolerates us because the bond requires it, but it has never shown submission. Until me. Until you. The weight of it settled between them. Heavy, undeniable, profound. You think I'm connected to her somehow, Kethra said slowly. That's why the beast recognizes me. I think you might be more than connected. Valdrich stepped closer, close enough to see the rapid pulse at her throat, the slight widening of her pupils. I think you might be what she was, a bondkeeper, born for the first time in 200 years. Kethra's breath caught. But I don't have a wolf. How could I be a bondkeeper if I don't know. The admission cost him. He was not a man accustomed to uncertainty. But I intend to find out. She looked at him then. Really looked, with those remarkable eyes that matched a portrait painted before his great-great-grandfather was born. You could have hidden this from me, she said softly. You could have kept it secret, figured it out yourself and never told me anything. Yes. Why didn't you? Because I couldn't. Because something in me needs you to know, because when you look at me like that, I forget how to be the king. But he couldn't say any of that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because you deserve the truth, he said instead. Whatever it is. Something shifted in her expression, softened. She reached out and her fingers brushed his wrist, light as a moth's wing, electric as lightning. Thank you, she whispered, for not treating me like a threat. Valdrich's blood rushed in a way it hadn't in years. His control nearly slipped. The council chamber fell silent when Valdrich entered. 23 lords and ladies sat around the great obsidian table, their wolves arranged behind them like living shadows. At the head of the table, in the seat closest to the throne, sat Lord Ashwin, his silver hair immaculate, his pale eyes sharp as broken glass. Your Majesty, Ashwin's voice dripped with courtesy. We were beginning to wonder if you would join us. I had matters to attend to. Valdrich took his seat at the throne, letting his gaze sweep the assembled council. I trust you've been occupying yourselves productively. We have been discussing the matter of the woman. Lady Vorn, ancient and iron-willed, folded her gnarled hands on the table. The one who allegedly bewitched your beast. She bewitched nothing. Valdrich's tone brooked no argument. Morak recognized her of its own accord. Recognized her as what, precisely? Lord Ashwin leaned forward, his wolf, a gray beast with yellow eyes, shifting restlessly behind him. She has no wolf, no bloodline, no existence in any record. And yet your beast, the sacred guardian of House Thornwell, abases itself before her like a pup. His lip curled. Either she is a sorceress of unprecedented power, or there is something you're not telling us. The challenge hung in the air. Valdrich considered his options. He could reveal the portrait, share what he'd discovered about Seraphine and the bondkeepers, lay everything bare and let the council draw their own conclusions. Or he could wait, gather more information, protect Kethra until he understood exactly what she was and who might want to harm her. Because someone did want to harm her. He was certain of it now. The erasure of her records, the thoroughness of it. The way she had been hidden since infancy, tucked away in a distant village, kept invisible for 23 years. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure she never existed. And now that she had emerged, that same someone would be watching, waiting. The investigation is ongoing, Valdrich said flatly. When I have answers, the council will be informed. And in the meantime? Ashwin's eyes glittered. She remains under your protection, in your fortress, with access to your beast and your household? Yes. Your Majesty, with the greatest respect. Your respect is noted, Lord Ashwin, as is your concern. Valdrich rose, signaling the end of discussion. The woman stays. Anyone who moves against her answers to me personally. Is that understood? Silence. Then, one by one, the council members inclined their heads. Even Ashwin, though his jaw was tight with barely suppressed fury. Valdrich strode from the chamber without looking back. He found Senna waiting in the corridor, her weathered face creased with worry. Lord Ashwin sent 3 ravens before the council began, she said quietly. My sources couldn't determine who received them. He's planning something. Almost certainly. Senna fell into step beside him. Your Majesty, there's something else. I found another fragment in the archives. About Seraphine. Valdrich stopped. What did it say? It was a page from King Alderon's personal journal. Most of it was destroyed, but one passage survived. Senna pulled a folded parchment from her robes. It says, she carries what must not be born. If it lives, everything we built will burn. The words settled into Valdrich's bones like ice. She was pregnant, he realized. When she disappeared, Seraphine was carrying a child. That would be my interpretation as well. Senna's eyes were grave. A child that King Alderon apparently considered dangerous enough to destroy his own Luna to prevent. But she wasn't destroyed. She vanished. Yes. Which means the child may have lived. Valdrich's mind raced. A bloodline hidden for 200 years, passed down in secret, generation to generation until now. Senna nodded toward the east tower, visible through the corridor window. Until her. Valdrich stared at the tower where Kethra slept, unknowing, unaware of the storm gathering around her. A descendant of Seraphine, a bondkeeper's heir, carrying blood that someone 2 centuries ago had considered threatening enough to erase from existence. And now she was here, in his fortress, under his protection. Double the guards on her chamber, he ordered. I want eyes on Lord Ashwin at all times. Every message he sends, every visitor he receives, I want to know. Consider it done. Senna hesitated. Your Majesty, if she is what we believe, the council will never accept her. You know what they'll demand. I know. And Lord Ashwin will use her against you. Frame her for treason. Claim she's manipulated you. He's been waiting for an opportunity to challenge your reign since your father died. I know that too. Then what will you do? Valdrich looked at the east tower again. Somewhere in there, a woman who should have been nothing, no wolf, no rank, no name, was rewriting everything he understood about his kingdom, his beast, himself. Whatever I have to, he said quietly. Whatever it takes to keep her alive. Senna said nothing. But the look she gave him spoke volumes. That night, Valdrich dreamed of white roses and a woman who looked exactly like Kethra, standing in a garden that no longer existed, holding a child in her arms. Protect her, the woman whispered. She is the last. If she falls, everything falls with her. He woke to the sound of screaming. The fire started in the kitchens. Kethra was jolted from sleep by the smell of smoke and the shriek of alarm bells, her pulse jumping before she was fully conscious. She threw herself out of bed, still wearing the simple night shift the servants had provided, and wrenched open her door. Chaos greeted her. Servants ran through corridors filling with gray haze. Guards shouted orders that overlapped and contradicted each other. Somewhere below, a woman was screaming for water, for help, for someone to save the bread stores. Miss Kethra! One of her assigned guards appeared through the smoke, his face streaked with soot. You need to stay in your room. The king's orders. People are hurt down there, Kethra interrupted. I can help. Miss, I really must insist. But she was already pushing past him, following the screams toward the source of the flames. The main kitchen was an inferno. Flames licked up the ancient wooden beams, devouring the ceiling in hungry gulps. A cluster of servants huddled near the entrance, coughing and crying, while kitchen workers stumbled out with burns on their arms and faces. Is everyone out? Kethra grabbed the nearest person, A young woman barely older than herself, her apron singed and smoking. Is everyone accounted for? The children, the woman gasped. The baker's children. They sleep in the back room. I couldn't. Kethra didn't think. She ran. The heat hit her like a physical force, stealing the breath from her lungs, scorching her skin through the thin night shift. Flames roared on all sides, their voices drowning out everything else. She couldn't see, could barely breathe. But somewhere ahead, she heard crying. "Hello?" she shouted. "Can you hear me?" "Here, we're here." A child's voice, high and terrified. Kethra found them huddled in the corner of a small storage room. 2 children, a boy and a girl, no older than 5 or 6. The girl was sobbing. The boy had his arms wrapped around his sister, his face white with fear. "It's okay," Kethra said, keeping her voice calm even as the ceiling groaned above them. "I'm going to get you out. Can you walk?" The boy nodded. "Good. Hold on to each other. Don't let go no matter what." She scooped up the smaller girl, grabbed the boy's hand, and turned back toward the door. The beam fell without warning. One moment there was a path. The next, there was a wall of flame, and something heavy and burning struck her shoulder, and the children were screaming, and Kethra couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't... Child. The voice wasn't human, wasn't external. It resonated inside her skull, vast and ancient and strangely familiar. "Let me in." She didn't understand, didn't have time to understand. The fire was everywhere, the children were crying, and she was going to die in this burning room having accomplished nothing. Trust. A single word. A command and a plea, all at once. Kethra closed her eyes, and something inside her opened. Power exploded through her veins, cold and luminous and absolutely overwhelming. It crashed through her body like a river breaking a dam, sweeping away fear and pain and limitation. Her shoulder stopped burning, her lungs stopped screaming. When she opened her eyes, the flames were parting around her, not dying, not extinguishing, parting, curving away from her body like water around a stone, creating a corridor of cool air through the inferno. The children stared at her with huge eyes. "Come on," Kethra breathed and led them through. They emerged into the courtyard as the kitchen roof collapsed behind them. Servants rushed forward to take the children, to wrap blankets around them, to cry and praise and thank. Kethra stood apart from it all, trembling, staring at her own hands like she had never seen them before. What had just happened? What had she done? "Kethra." She turned. Valdrich stood 3 feet away, still in his sleeping clothes, his hair disheveled, his face pale beneath the soot. His eyes swept over her. The singed night shift, the burns on her arms that were already fading fast, the absolute shock written across her features. "What did you do?" His voice was hoarse. "I don't know." The words came out cracked and broken. "Something spoke to me, inside my head. It said to let it in, and I..." "You did well, child." There it was again, that voice. Ancient and warm and utterly inhuman. "You have always been mine, from the first breath you took, from the first heartbeat." Kethra's knees buckled. Valdrich caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her shaking body. "I hear it," she whispered against his chest. "The voice. It's still there. It's... I have waited 200 years for you to remember, for you to awaken, for you to claim what was stolen." "What are you?" Kethra asked, and she wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or only in her mind. "What am I?" And then, stepping out of the shadows at the edge of the courtyard, came Morak. The great black wolf moved through the chaos like a creature from another world, ignoring the servants who scattered in terror, ignoring the guards who reached for weapons they knew were useless. It came straight toward Kethra, those molten gold eyes burning with an intelligence that was anything but animal. It stopped directly in front of her. And it spoke. Not with words, not with sound, but with images that flooded her mind. A garden of white roses, a woman with her face, a king who knelt before her with tears on his cheeks, a pregnancy kept secret, a flight through the night, a promise extracted in blood, hide her descendants, keep them safe, until the beast calls them home. Kethra gasped. Seraphine, she breathed. She's not just my ancestor. She was me, and I was her. Understanding crashed through her like lightning. The wolf, the bond, the connection that transcended blood and time and death itself. Seraphine hadn't just been the bondkeeper. She had merged with Morak, become something more than human, more than wolf. And when she'd fled, carrying the child that King Alderaan wanted dead, she had poured everything she was into the beast, her power, her essence, her very soul, ensuring that one day when her bloodline was ready, she would rise again, not as Seraphine, as Kethra. Oh gods, she whispered, the voice in my head. It's not the beast speaking, it's her. It's been her all along. Valdrich's arms tightened around her. Who? Who's speaking to you? Kethra looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, her entire understanding of herself shattering and reforming in a single devastating moment. My ancestor, she said, the woman from the portrait, the Luna who vanished. Her voice broke on the next words. She's been inside Morak for 200 years, waiting for me to be born. And now, Seraphine's voice whispered, gentle as a mother's touch. You understand? You are not wolfless, child. You have never been wolfless. You simply carry your wolf differently. You carry me. The days that followed the fire were a blur of revelations. Senna brought scroll after scroll to Kethra's chambers, fragments of history, pieces of the puzzle that had been her life. She learned that Seraphine had been born in the southern marshes, just as Kethra had been. That she had manifested her bond with Morak not through a wolf of her own, but through a connection that transcended the physical, spirit calling to spirit across the void. She learned that King Alderaan had loved Seraphine desperately, obsessively, and that his love had curdled into fear when he realized what she truly was. He was afraid of what we could become together, Seraphine whispered in her mind, a Luna with power equal to the king's, a bond that could not be broken or controlled. He wanted to possess me. When he realized he couldn't, he decided to destroy me instead. But you escaped, Kethra murmured, alone in her chamber, speaking to the presence that now lived permanently at the edge of her consciousness. I escaped. I hid our daughter with people I trusted. I poured my essence into Morak and waited. A pause, heavy with centuries of patience. I waited for you. Kethra pressed her palms against her eyes. It was too much, all of it. She had spent 23 years believing she was broken, defective, less than nothing. And now she was being told she carried the soul of an ancient Luna, that she was the heir to a power that had terrified a king, that she was... A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. Come in, she called, expecting Senna or perhaps the servant who brought her meals. It was Prim. The boy slipped through the door like a small ghost, his mismatched eyes huge in his pale face. He was carrying something. A bundle of cloth clutched against his chest. Prim? Kethra rose immediately. What's wrong? You look... They're coming for you, he whispered. Tonight. I heard them talking. Ice flooded her veins. Who? Who's coming? Lord Ashwin. He was meeting with some soldiers in the East Corridor. I was hiding because I didn't want to go to lessons and I heard everything. Prim's voice trembled. He said the king has been bewitched. He said you have to die before you corrupt the kingdom. He said... The boy's face crumpled. He said they're going to make it look like an accident, like you attacked the king and the guards had to stop you. Kethra's mind raced. She should run to Valdrich immediately, tell him what Prim had heard. Let him handle it with guards and authority and the full weight of the throne. But something stopped her. Careful, child. Seraphine's voice was sharp with warning. Ashwin has been planning this for days. If you go to the king now, you tip your hand. He'll adapt. Find another way. Strike when you're not expecting it. Where is the king now? Kethra asked Prim. In the council chamber. Lord Ashwin called an emergency session. The boy's hands tightened on his bundle. That's why I came. They've separated you. On purpose. Of course they had. Kethra looked at the window. At the darkening sky beyond. At the fortress that had become her shelter and was about to become her cage. You have two choices, Seraphine said. Run and confirm everything Ashwin has told them. That you're a threat. A sorceress. A danger to the kingdom. Or? Kethra asked silently. Or you face them. Show them what you truly are. Not a monster. Not a witch. But a Luna. Kethra's pulse raced. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to use this power. I could hurt someone. I could. You won't. The voice was steady. Certain. I am with you. I have always been with you. And tonight, we face our fate together. The door burst open. 6 soldiers in Ashwin's colors poured into the room, swords drawn. Kethra grabbed Prim and pushed him behind her instinctively, her body a shield between the child and the blades. Take the witch, the lead soldier commanded. The boy, too. He's seen too much. He's a child, Kethra shouted. The king's nephew. You can't... Lord Ashwin's orders supersede the king's in matters of kingdom security. The soldier smiled coldly. And by morning, Lord Ashwin will be regent. The bewitched king will be confined for his own protection, and you will be dead. They moved forward. Kethra felt the power surge inside her. Seraphine's essence, Morak's strength, 200 years of waiting finally unleashed. Pale fire blazed from her skin, and the soldiers stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Run, Prim, she commanded. Find the king. Tell him everything. But, now! The boy ran. 2 soldiers moved to pursue him, but Kethra stepped into their path, and the light around her flared brighter, driving them back. You want me? She said, her voice layered with something ancient and powerful. Then come and take me. They came. The battle was brief and brutal. Kethra had no training with a blade, no experience with combat, but Seraphine did. 2 centuries of watching from inside Morak, observing every war, every battle, every technique. It flowed through Kethra like muscle memory, guiding her movements, directing her power. 4 soldiers fell. The 5th fled. The 6th. The 6th got behind her. She felt the blade enter her back before she felt the pain. Cold steel sliding between her ribs, piercing something vital. Her legs gave out. The moonlit glow flickered and died. Should have killed you the moment you walked through those gates, the soldier said, twisting the blade. Kethra screamed, and somewhere in the fortress, answering her cry, a beast began to howl. The wall exploded inward. Morak came through in a storm of black fur and golden fury, massive jaws closing around the soldier before he could even turn. The man's scream was brief, wet, final. Then the beast was beside her, its great head lowering to her face, eyes filled with something that looked terrifyingly like grief. No, Seraphine's voice was frantic now. No, no, no. Not like this. Not when we finally... It's okay, Kethra whispered, blood bubbling on her lips. It's okay. I understand now. Why you waited. Why you chose me. Child, please. He's coming. Kethra could hear the footsteps thundering down the corridor. could feel, somehow, the terror and rage blazing through a bond she hadn't known existed until this moment. Valdrich is coming. He'll be here. You cannot die. I will not allow it. You can't stop it. Watch me. Power slammed into Kethra. Not gentle, not gradual, but a tidal wave of luminous energy that burned through every cell in her body. She felt Seraphine pouring into her, merging with her, two souls becoming one in a desperate, reckless attempt to heal what couldn't be healed. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Valdrich bursting through the ruined doorway, his face twisted with anguish, his mouth forming her name. Then nothing. She didn't wake for 5 days. Valdrich stayed. Every hour. Every minute. He held meetings at her bedside, signed documents while watching her chest rise and fall. Slept in the chair beside her bed when exhaustion finally claimed him, his hand wrapped around hers like an anchor. Lord Ashwin was in chains. The conspiracy unraveled within hours of the attack, guards turning on each other, confessions spilling like blood, the whole rotten structure collapsing under its own weight. Ashwin himself had tried to flee and been stopped by Morak, who had planted itself in front of the fortress gates and refused to move until the soldiers brought the traitor down. The beast hadn't left Kethra's side since. It lay at the foot of her bed now, its ancient gaze fixed on her still face with an intensity that made Valdrich's chest ache. He understood that intensity. He felt it himself, burning through him every time he looked at her. "You knew," he said to the beast quietly. "From the moment she entered, you knew what she was." Morak's tail twitched. It was the closest the creature ever came to acknowledgement. "You could have told me. You could have—" Valdrich stopped, laughing bitterly. "Right. You're a wolf. You don't speak." But that wasn't entirely true anymore. Something had changed during the attack. Some barrier had broken. Because since that night, Valdrich had been feeling things that weren't his own. Flickers of emotion at the edge of his consciousness, impressions of thought that didn't originate in his own mind. Seraphine, the ancient Luna. She was there now, woven into Morak, woven into Kethra, connected to him through bonds he was only beginning to understand. The door opened softly. Prim crept in, carrying a handful of winter flowers, scraggly things from the fortress garden, half dead from frost. "I brought these for her," he said, setting them carefully on the bedside table. "Mother says flowers help sick people feel better." Valdrich's throat tightened. "That's very kind of you. She saved me." Prim climbed into the chair across from Valdrich, his small face solemn. "In the fire. And again when the soldiers came. She put herself in front of me both times. She's brave. She's family." Valdrich looked at his nephew sharply. Prim met his eyes without flinching. The same way Kethra always did. "Papa used to say that family isn't about blood," Prim continued. "It's about who shows up when things get scary, who stands in front of you when the bad things come." He looked at Kethra's still face. She showed up. She stood in front of me. So she's family now. Out of the mouths of children. Valdrich reached over and squeezed Prim's hand. "You're right," he said quietly. "She is." A small sound came from the bed. Both of them went rigid. Morak's head snapped up, ears pricked forward. Kethra's eyes opened. Fog and forest, confused and miraculously alive. "Valdrich!" Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. He was at her side in an instant, cupping her face in his hands, searching her eyes for any sign of damage or corruption. But all he saw was her. Just her. The woman who had walked into his city with nothing and somehow become everything. "You're awake," he breathed. "You're actually—" "I had the strangest dream." She smiled weakly. "There was a woman who looked like me, and a wolf, and they were arguing about whether I was allowed to die." "We were not arguing." came a voice in Valdrich's mind, gentle, amused, achingly familiar. We were negotiating. He blinked. Did you hear that? Kethra's smile widened slightly. Yes, I think we all hear each other now. She looked at Morak. The bond is complete. Seraphine, Morak, me, and you. All connected. Valdrich should have been frightened. Should have been concerned about the implications, the politics, the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. Peace. She wants you to know something, Kethra said softly. Seraphine. She says Alderaan was a fool. That power shared between mates isn't weakness, it's strength. Mates. Valdrich repeated, his blood rushing. That's what she called us? Kethra's cheeks flushed pink. I told her she was presumptuous. We've only known each other for a week. Valdrich laughed. It came out broken and wet, and he didn't care. She's not wrong, he said, and watched her eyes go wide. Before she could respond, Prim threw himself at the bed, wrapping his small arms around whatever part of Kethra he could reach. You're awake, he shouted. You're not dead. I brought you flowers, but they're kind of ugly. But Mother said it's the thought that counts. Kethra laughed. A real laugh, warm and bright, despite her obvious exhaustion, and hugged the boy back. They're beautiful, she said. Thank you. Valdrich watched them together, the broken woman and the grieving child, and felt something click into place inside his chest. Family, Prim had said. Yes. This was family, and he would burn the world before he let anyone threaten it again. Spring came to the northern reach like a hesitant guest, testing the warmth before committing. Snow retreated from the mountains, flowers pushed through thawing earth, and in the courtyard of the fortress, a small crowd gathered to witness something that hadn't happened in over 2 centuries. A Luna's bonding ceremony. Kethra stood at the center of the ancient stone circle, wearing a gown of silver and midnight blue that the seamstresses had worked on for weeks. Her hair was braided with winter roses, white ones, like the garden in Seraphine's portrait. At her feet, Morak lay in magnificent repose, amber eyes calm and knowing. Across from her stood Valdrich. He was dressed formally, the crown of House Thornwell resting on his dark hair, every inch the Alpha King. But when he looked at her, his eyes softened in a way that made her chest tighten. Are you ready? He asked quietly, for her ears only. Are you? She countered. I'm about to become the most powerful Luna in your kingdom's history. Your council might revolt. Half of them already have. The other half are too afraid of Morak to try. She laughed despite herself. The high priestess began the ceremony. Ancient words in the old tongue, blessings and bonds and promises that would outlast both their mortal lives. Kethra listened with half an ear, most of her attention fixed on Valdrich's face. 3 months ago, she had been no one. Wolfless, nameless, invisible. Now she stood at the center of everything, carrying an ancient Luna's soul, bonded to a legendary beast, about to marry a king who looked at her like she'd hung the stars. Funny how things work out, Seraphine whispered warmly. Insufferable, Kethra thought back, but she was smiling. The priestess reached the final blessing. Valdrich took Kethra's hands in his. Before the old gods and the new, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. I take this woman as my Luna, my equal, my mate. His grip tightened. I give her my protection, my loyalty, and my heart, from this day until my last. Kethra felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. Before the old gods and the new, she repeated, I take this man as my alpha, my equal, my mate. I give him my protection, my loyalty, and my heart, from this day until my last. The priestess smiled. Then let it be witnessed and sealed. Valdrich kissed her. The crowd erupted in cheers. Somewhere in the noise, Kethra heard Prim's voice shouting something enthusiastic about finally having a proper aunt. Morak rose to its feet and howled, a sound of pure triumph that echoed off the mountains and rolled across the kingdom. When they finally broke apart, Valdrich rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly, the words meant for her alone. "I have loved you since you walked into my city and demanded I find your answers. I have loved you since you stood between fire and children without hesitation. I have loved you since you looked at me without fear and made me want to be worthy of that look." Kethra's heart overflowed. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since you knelt before me that first day and asked what I needed instead of what I was." He kissed her again, softer this time. A promise. When they turned to face the crowd, hands linked, Kethra caught sight of Prim pushing through to the front, his face shining with joy. "Does this mean I can call you Aunt Kethra now?" he demanded. She laughed, bending to scoop him into a hug. "You can call me whatever you want." "Good." He wrapped his arms around her neck. "Because Uncle Valdrich has been moping for weeks and it's been really annoying. Now maybe he'll smile more." Valdrich made an indignant noise. Kethra laughed harder. "This," Seraphine's voice came, warm and content, and finally at peace. "This is what I waited for. Not power, not revenge. This, family, love, home." Kethra looked at Valdrich, at Prim, at the great black wolf that pressed against her side like a shadow that had finally found its light. Yes, she thought back. Home. And for the first time in her life, she knew exactly where she belonged.